All right, guys, welcome back to the five-star pod. Today we have a special guest on from Naval Wilson, Gathya. But let's first introduce everyone here on the table. All right. Actually, we're on episode 28. Right?
28, yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. So I got Rod here to my right side. I got
Steve.
your name?
Closest guy.
What's your closest guy?
I don't remember his name.
Kenny. And we got Gathya here, and we have Winston.
Welcome, Gathya. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
man,
I'm
pleasure, yeah.
Thanks for joining us
Welcome.
today, by the way.
Yeah,
of
Gathya,
course.
welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for the
you.
headphones again.
Yeah,
Sounds great.
You wear it well.
Thank you.
Does your
So-
voice sound different now? Like
Oh,
in
yeah.
your mind, it sounded different now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So today
Fantastic.
we have Gathya here because our topic today is going to be about on power of sales, and Gathya is a specialist in this area. So from what I understand,
Yes, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Actually, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah,
Sure.
you yourself and the company as well.
Sure. So my name is Gathya. I am a lawyer here at Naval Wilson. I predominantly practice in litigation and corporate, but a lot of my litigation work is real estate related. The firm is a predominantly real estate firm. So from the real estate department, a lot of breaches. I'm sure you guys have dealt with that. Breaches, just general, I bought my home and then like a chandelier was missing, which I thought I was getting, like the issues like that, latent patent defects, and then finally power of sale. So both on the lender side and the borrower side. So I would like to think that I have an understanding from both sides. It's never a good place to be, but it is what it is. I've been practicing since 2018, and I've been here since I became a lawyer.
Quick question. So,
Yeah.
so for some of our listeners, if you were to explain it to a 5-year-old what power of sale is, like in one or two sentences, how would you phrase that to a child?
I would say it's when you haven't paid your mortgage, so your lender is going to sell the property to get their money back.
Ah,
Okay. Actually, yeah. Maybe you can help us understand the difference between a foreclosure and a power of sales, because typically people always get those two mixed up.
Yeah, for sure. It's very people use it interchangeably, but it's actually pretty different. So a power of sale, which is the most common sort of path that lenders will take, is when you as a lender take possession of the property to sell it. So if you say, for example, there's 3 mortgages, you're the first mortgage, you take it, you sell it, you take your money. If there's any leftover money, you have to give it to the people after you. So you give it to the second. If there's even more money left over, great. The third gets it. And if there's even more money for the borrower gets that money back. You have to sell it. You can't keep it for yourself. Whereas foreclosure on the other side, you basically get to take over the property. So say the property is worth $1 million and your mortgage is only $500,000, you still get that whole $1 million home. So it's depending on sort of how much equity is in the property, lenders will choose that path. One of the downfalls of foreclosure, it's a very court involved process. So it's very expensive. It takes a lot of time. Whereas a power of sale, so long as the courts can kind of give you a hearing date fairly quickly, like you can get it done in a decent amount of time. So that's the biggest difference is, like I said, either you have to sell it or you get to keep it.
So, okay, I hear you. So like if for a bank, if they take it back on a foreclosure, they get to keep it as an asset for the bank.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they can take it, they can rent it out. A lot of the times they'll like do work to it. Banks usually don't like to hold property because they're here for the money.
Yeah.
So banks are not usually ones to do foreclosure. It's mainly either private lenders or like individual lenders that this is kind of like their first time doing it, and they realize that there's a lot of equity in the property, so it makes sense for them to sort of keep it. But banks generally, like I said, they're here to make money. They don't want to hold on to property.
Yeah,
So
their business is about loaning money out,
Yes,
not
basically.
holding on to houses.
yeah, so the more when they hold the house, that's money they can't now lend out, right? So they normally, I've never seen a bank do a foreclosure.
Yeah,
Okay.
foreclosure sounds much worse for the borrower, right? I mean,
Yeah, like I said, it's very it's very specific to each situation based on the equity. But in fairness, though, most of the times when you're in a situation of power of sale, you don't have much equity, because if you did, you would have usually figured out a solution.
Right.
But it's in those cases where there is equity, and as a borrower, though, you can fight back on a foreclosure and say, listen, no, I'm going to pay you out, and figure out a way to sort of pay them back. But if a lender is successful, yeah, they get to keep that whole house.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
Yeah.
I haven't
Interesting.
seen too much foreclosures. Do they exist in Ontario or do they exist in other provinces?
They do, it exists in Ontario, but because it's such a cumbersome process for
Mhm.
both the lender and the borrower, it's not common. Like I said, it's also because the court is very much involved, and especially when you have other mortgages. Because if you're first trying to do a foreclosure, the second is going to be like, "Hey, I want my money."
Right.
So
yeah.
you're
Yeah.
getting pushback from your second, you're getting pushback from any other mortgages, plus you're getting pushback from the borrower. So it's not. It's a very unique instance where you would choose to do that.
Okay.
How long does it take from missing a mortgage payment from power to power of sale?
A mortgage has to be in default for 15 days before you can issue a power of sale notice. So normally what lenders will do is as soon as you miss that payment, they'll send you a demand letter and say, listen, you have 15 days to pay this. If not, we're moving to power of sale. So in the 15 days they pay, great. But if they don't, then you issue what's called a notice of sale under charge, which gives the borrower 35 days to either leave the property or pay you out. So if within that 35 days, same thing, they bring it into consent and they pay you out, great. If not, the process will change depending on if the property is vacant or if it's if it's occupied. So when it's vacant, it's easy. As soon as you give that 35 days, you get a locksmith change the locks, you're good. You take possession of that house, you list it, you sell it, you get your money back. And like I said, if there's more money to pay out, you pay out. If there's people on the property, which is most properties, especially if it's owner occupied, you will have to go to court because you as a lender, you can't go and forcibly move anyone, right? Like you can't just pick them up and move them anywhere. So the only person who can do that in Ontario is the sheriff. So you have to go to court to get the court to give you vacant possession of the property. When you get that order for vacant possession, then you give that to the sheriff. Then the sheriff will go and forcibly remove if required. And to be honest, so at that point, usually they all leave. Like they'll leave by then or figure out a solution.
Right.
But so then you would have to get the sheriff to get them out. Then it's the same process. You list the property, you sell it, you get your money and move on.
So could that take months?
Yes.
Years?
Depending on how, let's call it, slow the court is and aggressive the lawyer is. So for example, I have a power of sale in Toronto, but my first available court date is until October of 2024.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So it is going to take time just
So
because it's
The
getting
owner
a
gets
bit-
to live in that home.
Well, they're not making payments.
Yeah, they're
so-
not making payments, but like obviously, like it does suck for the lender, but like obviously you add all that up at the end and you collect it then.
Yeah,
But so what some lawyers do, depending on the property, where the property is, there's rules that kind of govern the jurisdiction. So for example, properties in Durham region, a lot of people don't know this. You can bring that action in Milton, and Milton, like you can get a date really, really quickly.
Oh,
So
wow.
some lawyers, what they'll do is they'll start the action in another court, such as Milton, if the
Okay.
rules allow it.
Yeah.
And in Milton, you can get get a date in like a month, 2 months, something like that. So
How's
yeah.
Thursday?
That's good.
5
So is that
o'clock?
like a loophole? That's a loophole that a lot of
It kinda-
lawyers must do. then,
It kind of
imagine.
reminds me of like the driver's license.
You know, I was just thinking that too.
Yeah,
I was
it's like
thinking that
redoing your
too.
Why would
passport.
you go to Toronto if I can get my license
Yeah.
easier somewhere else, right?
Everyone pays in Milton apparently. So
Yeah. So I've seen a lot, especially with Durham properties, because Oshawa, getting a date is not that easy. So what they'll do is they'll bring it in Milton, and then you can get a date much quicker.
Mhm.
So you go through the process much sooner. It's the same process. It's just because the court is so much quieter, you get your date sooner, you get them out sooner.
It's interesting that you mentioned getting the sheriff. My first experience with that was with a commercial. Get a bailiff, right, and then the sheriff comes and executes it. Are bailiffs involved in any of this, or just straight sheriff?
It's so that a bailiff technically can't remove someone from a residential property. It's only the sheriff that can do that. Don't get me wrong, there are property management companies that can get very aggressive where, especially as a homeowner, you don't know only the sheriff can take me out. If someone's at your door and they
Yeah.
look scary and they're saying you have
Yeah,
72 hours to get out of your house,
Yeah.
a lot of people are going to leave.
Mhm.
So a lot of people don't know that. They'll say not a lot, but there's some private lenders who do have property management companies, and they're in the game, they know what they're doing. So they'll show up to the house on a random Wednesday and be like, you have to leave in 72 hours. And like you have these like big guys showing up at your house. Like obviously you're concerned, you have young kids, like you don't know what to do. So you don't want trouble. So you just leave.
Yeah.
But legally, only a sheriff can forcibly remove you from your home.
Is that legal? I mean, that type of enforcement, that type of intimidation, it seems a little off.
No, it's a tricky question because it's one of those things. It's not that what they're doing is like they can tell you need to leave. If you don't leave, they can't do anything about it.
There's no consequences, but
the problem is,
intimidation.
yeah, for sure. But also the problem is, as a borrower, you're already in a situation where you don't have money. You don't have money to go and try to fight this. That's the problem, right?
Okay.
So it's like you're just like, hey, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that it is wrong what they're doing, but the outcome is what is going to happen anyways. You're just prolonging the
Yeah, there has to be a
inevitable.
line somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And when you say sheriff, is it like one guy with a hat, or is it just like multi? Like,
He's
is it
gonna
a
have some
team?
stars on his
boots.
Because I always hear that. Let's call
He's got
the
Spurs
sheriff.
boots and he's got the medal.
I wish.
the star.
Riding in a horse.
They move as slow in Toronto as if there's only one of them. There's an office. So it's called the enforcement office. And they are responsible for actions like this. But in Toronto, still, unfortunately, it's just slow. So not on a power of sale, but on a landlord tenant board matter.
Yeah.
It's the same sheriff, and the sheriff couldn't get out to the property for 4 weeks. So the delay is not meant to be there. It's meant to be something that's almost instantaneous. But just because of the reality of how the system is, it can take so much longer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a question around tenants. So if the tenant is living in the property and the property does go under power of sale, and what happens? Because they have to, if they have a contract and they're contracted to live there for X amount of period, and
What
then
happens?
they're like, oh wait, my landlord didn't pay his bills.
You need two sheriffs at that point. Like,
So under the Mortgages Act, a tenant, so long as they're fulfilling their obligations as a tenant, when a lender takes over a property that's tenanted, they step into the shoes of the landlord. Sorry,
Okay.
so they are as if they are the landlord. So, for
Mhm.
example, if they want to sell it, they give notice like how your normal landlords will have to give notice.
Mhm.
They essentially assume that role as landlord. So long as, again, if the tenant's also doing something wrong, then you still are the landlord and you have to take recourse accordingly. But if they are paying their bills and they're, like you said, say it's a 1 year term and they're on month 4, they get to stay there. Because like the point is like they shouldn't be punished because they're
Right.
landlord. I mean, yeah, their landlord.
But
is
they
moron.
have no reason if they're comfortably living there and the bank's holding on to it. They can live there for, let's say, 2 years, 3
Yeah.
years.
For sure.
Mhm.
Again, it's not typical that a bank would hold on to a property that long. But say you have a private lender, if the tenant is sort of doing what they need to do, then there's not really much you can do. And also, like from a practical point of view, like selling a tenanted property, I'm sure you guys know it's difficult. Like
Mhm.
the value of it goes down, showings get harder, and all of that. So it does make it a little bit more complicated. But yeah, their tenants' rights are protected as normal.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So they have all their tenant rights, and
Yeah.
that really hurts for the bank then, because
Yeah.
they have to hold on to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So but that's also why like I'm sure you guys know, like power of sale properties are already sort of sold at let's call it a bargain. But then when you have a tenant on top of that, because at the end of the day, especially something like a bank, all they care about is their own money, right? So if you have a mortgage that's $1 million on the properties, say it's even worth 1.5, if the bank sells for 1.3, they get their money back. That's all they care about, right?
Yeah.
So long as they're not doing it like significantly under market value and it's within the realm of what is market value, and market value is not a science, right? It's definitely a range. So long as they sort of get a number that they do the calculation, say, okay, it pays the debt, like our mortgage debt, it pays the commission that we need to pay, like whatever, we're done, and they'll just sell it for sort of what comes up.
I should.
Sorry, what's stopping them from significantly devaluing? Like if the property was worth 1.5 and their mortgage only 500,000,
Mhm.
can they bring it down to
So-
800,000, 700,000?
So they have an obligation to any mortgages after them, as well as the borrower, to get what they call the true value of the property. So like that's not, again, it's not a science. There's not one number that you're going to get at, but something as significant as that, of course, they can't do. Obviously, if no one does anything about it, then no one's gonna say anything to them, but their risk is that someone like the borrower or a second mortgage comes behind them and says, listen, you sold it for significantly under what it was worth. Because of that, I lost my money. I actually have a file right now where the first is selling, and that is a concern that, because of the value that they sold it, my client's not going to get his money back. So we're trying to get the lender to list at a higher price so that, we can both sort
And
of
you're
get our money.
representing the second mortgage.
Yeah,
Got
yeah.
it.
Oh, that was the question I was going to ask you.
Sure, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, because I mean, what if it was a power sale? Like they defaulted on a second mortgage or a third mortgage?
Mhm.
Can they still go through the power of sale process?
Yeah, so any mortgagee, can go through the power of sale process. The only difference is you have to pay everyone above you. So say, for example, I'm the second mortgage and my mortgage goes into default and I issue power of sale. Even if I'm the one that took on the process, the first still gets their money first.
Mhm.
So say, which is also like you have to look at the numbers when you're making these decisions, because if there's not enough money to pay you, like there's no point in you spending money to get back not your money, right?
Yeah.
So especially if you're not the first, like you definitely need to look at the numbers. But yeah, you have to. So say, for example, property's 1.5, first is 800,000, your 300,000. The 800,000 gets paid first,
Mhm.
then your 300,000 gets paid, and then whatever's left over goes to the borrower.
Another question is, then, what if there isn't enough equity to pay back all the creditors?
That's a great question. So depending on and it goes back to that order thing, depending on who issues the power of sale, you have to pay everyone ahead of you. So say, for example, let's use the second again. So the second mortgage is issuing a power of sale. The properties where it's say 1.5, the first is $1 million and you are 500,000 and there's not enough to pay you out. You can still sell by power of sale, but if there's not enough to pay off everyone ahead of you, then you can't. So then what will normally happen in that instance is the first will take over, and the first will basically just take their own money. If they get a loss, they get a loss and they'll sue for that. But then everyone else is sort of out of luck.
Oh, there's just SOL.
Yeah, well, yes and no. You can technically, it's still, at that point, you're basically an unsecured creditor, right? It's like, imagine I just gave you $100 and, whatever.
No
but
collateral, nothing.
the chances are, if a person is in that state of a situation, like the chances of you being able to sue them and collect that money, like you have to also weigh that option, right? If they work, of course, you can garnish their wages and things like that. But it's up, like legally it's available to you, but like you have to do that decision making of if you think you can get that money back.
It's also the risk of doing business too, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, it's risky because even as a realtor, because if we take on, let's say, that power sale listing and there's not enough money in the equity,
Yeah.
right? Like for example, like A lender gets 1, B lender gets 2, and then all the creditors that go behind it,
Mhm.
and the realtors are like the last on the list.
Yeah,
So we may not
paid.
get paid
for sure.
on selling the home.
Yeah. So if you're selling a property and like you're selling it on behalf of the borrower, but they're already in the situation of a power of sale, like they've already like say that notice of sale has been served, like you really need to run your numbers because sometimes it's not going to make sense. Like you said, when you're paying, when you do a normal transaction, mortgages get paid out first. If there's any like CRA and stuff, they have super priority liens, so they also will get paid out. So you have to run the numbers and see if it makes sense because sometimes there's not going to be enough equity. Like I had one where that the realtor like ended up cutting his commission to like 0.25% because there was just no money left in the property to pay out the full commission, and they're just like, okay, let's just let the transaction go through.
Yeah.
0.25 is full commission?
Point
No,
Whatever,
0.25.
that's what's left.
Yeah.
That's what's left.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So,
So,
wait,
so
as a
then
realtor,
their take is
Yeah.
point.
that's interesting actually, because what if you're the
0.025?
realtor that bought the property and they had the 2.5 commission on the cost side?
Yeah.
You may not get paid
Wow.
either,
Yeah.
and you use your
Yeah, of course.
That's
That's the worst
fantastic.
because
tip.
you're
I mean,
at that point you're
that's
actually at a loss. Like
Yeah.
0.25, you're like,
Oh,
well,
what's
I had to
left?
spend money to.
well, poor
And-
us.
With my
right?
client.
And you have to also remember that your claim for commission is going to be from your client, right? Because
Yeah.
your client agreed. And like your client essentially didn't do anything wrong. Like they just bought a property that was unfortunately didn't have a lot of money in it, but
Mhm.
they didn't do anything wrong. So now your legal claim is against your own client, but I can't imagine
Yeah,
that many
no
people are
one's
going to,
gonna-
no one's going to do that. So
But
it's just,
You'd think so. I mean,
before I forget,
Yeah.
you mentioned about CRA, priority. There were a couple cases involving hoarders around the city where, what I've heard of, and there were accrued amount of taxes arrears, and it runs into the maybe 100,000, maybe a lot
Of back
many years.
taxes, like
Back
taxes.
taxes, like,
Wow. Okay.
maybe 10 plus years.
Yeah, so sometimes the city at a point will, if you don't pay your property taxes, they'll register a lien on your property.
Mhm.
And then you also those have to get discharged as well. So it really, like, the thing with power of sale is it's less legal and more numbers. Like, you have to look at your numbers and
Right.
see if it makes sense before you decide, okay, let me take this listing or not.
So when would, I guess, yeah, if the numbers don't make sense, do they end up going down that foreclosure path versus the power of sale path?
No, usually what the lender will usually if the borrower is in a situation where they have no options available to them, let's call them a prudent borrower, will just voluntarily give up the house to the lender just to stop the bleeding, right? Because the longer that the borrower stays in the property, more interest is accruing, more fees are accruing, all of that. So sometimes, like, it's as unfortunate as it sounds, you will have a borrower that says, listen, I'm going to find a rental property. Here's the keys. You do what you need to do, because the sooner they sell, the more money they can get, the less fees that are involved.
Right.
Simply
And just
walk away.
Yeah. And like, sometimes, like, you have, and obviously that's a very calculated decision you're making. Like, you're not making that decision
Right.
lightly, but sometimes that's the only option.
Well, what are some of the common reasons why purchasers go under power of sale or foreclosure?
One of the most common ones that people don't think about is when you're buying that property, say you have to go private for whatever reason, appraisal's low, whatever, you have to go private. Most private mortgages are only a year term, right? So you've been paying it fine every month that the bills come, you pay it no problem. But then when the renewal comes, if the market has dropped and your appraisal is not coming in right, the bank, it's not that they don't want, like, like, everyone, any lender is going to do that calculated risk. So it's not that you were a bad quote unquote borrower and that you were defaulting. It's just that they don't have there's no money in your property to renew. So now you're scrambling because you're trying to find another mortgage to pay off the original mortgage, but every other mortgage is going to have the same issue. So that's one that, like, I think everyone thinks when you are in power of sale, like, oh, you didn't pay your mortgage.
Right.
But sometimes it's just on the renewal you have the issue
Right.
of finding a new mortgage to cover that one.
That's interesting
Good point.
because right now a lot of people are dealing with
Renewals.
these renewals.
Yeah.
Because in 2020, 2022, whatever, like, they borrowed significant
It
amount
was
of money
super
because
low,
the low
too.
rates are so low. Now they're getting paid, like, their rates are going up way, way high, and they can't afford them.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, especially if you're on a variable mortgage and your mortgage started off, say in 2020, and you were at like 2% or whatever crazy number it was, and now, like,
You're at 6%.
you're at like 6-7%. So that difference is quite large.
Yeah.
So like that's a big issue too. It's just like you can no longer afford the payments that
Right.
are required.
So are you
of
seeing
you.
a lot more of these power of sales coming up?
Oh, 100%. We deal with, like, especially for my lender clients, I've seen it where, like I said, like, they've bought the property and it's a 1-year term, and then on that renewal, it's just the value has gone down. So I had one where the property was in, I want to say, St. Catharines, and she had only bought the year before. And when she resold it, she walked away with maybe $15,000 in her hand.
Dang.
Because she had to sell it because she couldn't get another mortgage. So by the time she sold it, paid her realtor, and paid her lawyer, blah blah blah. Like, her lawyer told me, he's like, she gets like $15,000, and I was like, damn.
It's like losing her entire deposit.
Yeah,
that's
she did. She
insane.
lost her entire deposit, because the market was the way that it was.
Wow.
Maybe she overpaid, though, to be honest.
We've been hearing a lot too now with these mortgage renewals where the banks are giving options of extended amortization periods.
Oh, I've
So
seen ones
we're
that are like
seeing, like,
40 years now, and I know
Well,
I'm
60
on the
years,
news,
right?
on the news, there's like 70, 80, 90
which is
year
crazy.
It's insane.
and it's still negative amortization.
Oh yeah, damn.
It almost feels like a scam, to be honest, like, from the bank's perspective. Like, they're like, oh yeah, your monthly is like this much. It's like, it almost feels like they're kind of duping you into, like, here we can, you can pay less, but then you owe us for like 60
it's
years.
a temporary solution with them because they're still getting their payments.
Yeah.
Cash flow.
And
yeah.
the
numbers,
borrower is still
right?
not losing their home, but they have time to figure
I
out a
guess.
solution.
But the solution, the other part of it is getting kicked out of the home,
Yeah,
which is
then you're
worse, right?
homeless. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, like, to be honest, that's a reality that a lot of people are not ready to face, which is fair. Like, to say, especially like if you have things like family homes, stuff like that, where you lived here
Yeah.
for the last like 10, 15, 20, whatever the time is. And then to all of a sudden be faced with the reality that you might have to get kicked
Yeah,
out,
Mhm.
especially if
extension.
you have young children, all of that. Like it's a hard thing to
Mm.
face.
So actually, the question is now, like, at what point does the bank really say, okay, you know what, we're okay with you doing like a 70-year amortization period for whatever $3,000 a month on your interest payments?
I
Like,
think
how does that like, do you know where that process starts to?
I to be honest, like I think they're like, again, banks are here to make money, so they run some sort of actuary number and whatever makes sense to them. Because at the end of the day, they still have security. So yes, the market goes up and down, but it also will one day go up again, right?
Mhm.
So if you can sort of hold yourself over until it does go back up, like sometimes that makes sense. So that like that's just they're here to make money and they're doing it well.
Oh, you know,
Unfortunately.
Winston mentioned about, like possible scam. It seems like a scam. And extending the mortgage, how they structure like amortization, like to begin with, is already like really tough because every time you renew, it jumps back to
Yeah.
zero.
Yeah.
Like it resets.
It resets to year one.
Oh yeah,
that's-
no, it's crazy. Even
Yeah.
like the amount that you're paying. Like I remember I bought my first condo in 2021, and when the first payment went through, I was like, "How is the principal only like $200? Like something crazy?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "I don't understand how I'm never gonna be able to pay this off."
It's like
Yeah.
you're renting.
$2,000 of
It's like,
interest.
it's like,
Yeah.
well, it's like you're
Renting
renting
from the
from the bank.
Yeah, it's funny. We always when I bought my condo, like one of my coworkers, he's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
congratulations, you bought a mortgage." Like I didn't buy a condo, I bought a mortgage.
Yeah, you bought the debt. You didn't buy the
Yeah.
house. You bought
Yeah.
the debt.
But yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, just to kind of talk about the negative mortgages before. So, like some of the listeners, they may not know. So let's say like if it was like $3,000 a month, and technically if it's like a 25-year, you're supposed to pay like 4,000. So that
Okay, so
extra
so
thousand,
basically what you're saying is that there's two parts to the mortgage payments, right? There's the principal and then the interest portion.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
let's say you're only supposed to pay like the 3,000 a month, and whatever surplus that's doesn't even cover the interest gets tacked onto your total borrow amount.
Yeah.
That's right.
So it's
this-
it's like paying a credit card at that point. It's just,
Well, actually, it's worse because you're still
it's-
owing money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Actually, it tacks onto
But,
your
so that's
total.
that's what Winston's describing as negative amortization,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? Where there's two payments, one payment, well, within your mortgage, there's two payments. There's principal and there's or the interest, and you're not even paying your principal at this point because you can't afford it, and you're paying only what you can pay for the interest,
Mhm.
and even
It might not
that
even
may not
cover-
cover your
yeah.
interest payments. So the difference of the interest payment gets added on to your principal.
So
Which you already
snowball-
couldn't afford,
Yeah,
which
it's
is-
already
Exactly.
snowballing.
Yeah.
So all of a
your
sudden,
total
your
borrow.
$800,000 mortgage
Yeah.
could be like $810,000.
Which is
Well, at the end of
crazy.
it could be like
Or
like
more.
way more,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like over the course
But
of the
I'd still
amortization.
argue that's better than being removed from your house. I mean, you could suffer now, but maybe in the next 2 years, financial
Yeah.
situations
Might get a
improve.
windfall.
could
You
Yeah.
win the
Could
lottery,
be.
like I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
that could happen.
Maybe your career could have changed.
Yeah.
and you found a
Maybe.
better option.
We became realtors.
Buy some time.
I don't know about that. I don't know.
But
We're not getting commissions on power sales, so we're not.
Yeah, that is. I see some agents that do the power sale work, and
Yeah.
the work they have to put
know.
into.
Yeah.
I remember I had this client, and I was acting on the borrower's side,
Mhm.
and unfortunately, and again, we'll go back to the fact that the reality is really hard to deal with. So, they ended up the house was in default, the mortgage was in default, sorry. So they decided they were like, let's get ahead of it and sell it ourselves.
Mhm.
But they were still so like they were not ready to leave. So like it was the closing day and like they had not moved out.
Oh,
There was
yeah.
furniture.
Oh,
so like
no.
the realtor was literally like got a
Yeah,
truck
yeah.
and pulled up to the house and was like, listen, like you guys gotta go. Like we're gonna
Yeah.
like you're gonna risk breaching, which is gonna be even more costly for you now. You're on top of your costs already. So yeah, it's hard. You guys put in a lot of work when there's a power
Yeah,
sale
there's
property.
a lot of work on, well, selling a home
Yeah.
for one.
Yeah.
But on a power sale,
Yeah.
there must be a lot of other red tapes that you have to go through.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also when you're listing a power sale property, I don't know if we're going to get there, but we can talk about that. You have to remember that the property is, you're selling it as is, right? So you're
Yeah.
not making any, your lender is not making any representations or warranties on the condition of the house, which is also part of the reason why you sell at a lower value. But the other thing is your borrower has the right to redeem. So usually in the schedule, there's a clause that says, like like something along the lines of like this property is subject to the borrower's right to redeem. So like you might be like 2 days away from the closing, and then the borrower says, "Hey, I have the money all of a sudden."
I was gonna ask you that
Oh, wow.
afterwards.
Yeah.
Because yeah, like let's say you sell the power of sale, and then the original borrower says, "Oh, I have the money now."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, you can't. The borrower, because of their right to redeem, can do that. So they can pay the mortgage into good standing. Some by some miracle at that point they got the money, but yeah, and then it's also a risk to the buyer because now this house that say they were going to move in, something like that house
Yeah,
is gone. It isn't. In fairness, I will be honest, I haven't seen it happen that often because again, if you couldn't pay this entire time, like the fact that you finally got money in like the
Right.
11th hour is not that normal. But from a legal point of view, that risk is always there.
So actually leads me to like, well, for us anyways, do you think it's a good thing? Because okay, it's a common question that we get all the time.
Is
Yeah.
it better?
Is it good to
as a
buy a
buyer?
power
Is it a
sale?
good deal?
Yeah, it's a
Is it
good deal. It's a good deal. Let's pick up a power
'Cause-
sale. Do you have any power sales? It's like, is it a good deal or not?
Yeah, we have some buyers. They're always like,
Always.
we want some good deals.
But that's the thing. I think that everyone thinks you're going to get like some significant discount. Like they're going to buy $1 million house for like $500,000.
Too much for
That's
YouTube.
not even gonna.
No,
yeah,
on
that's
YouTube, they get rich.
Yeah. So, like I can like just for context. We had a property where it was what had happened was it was originally sold, and then I don't know if no one ran the numbers properly, so it was in default. But the borrower sold the property. Then when it came time to closing, there wasn't enough money to pay everybody out. And when the one thing to remember is when you sell as the borrower, you have to pay everybody. Like, you know how I said, like when you're the second, you only have to pay the people above you, blah, blah, blah. But when you're the homeowner, you have to make sure you have enough money to pay first, second, third, commission, all of that. So when they ran those numbers, there wasn't enough to close. So they couldn't sell the property. Like they couldn't sell the property themselves. So they had actually sold the property for 1.8, and then the first took over almost immediately. The first took over, and when they ended up selling, it was like 1.55. So there was a $350,000 difference. But the market, like, there's a lot of factors. There's not just the fact that it was under power of sale. The market had dropped because this was in the last, I would say, like 4 months this had happened. So the market significantly shifted. So there was a lot of factors. But yeah, a lot of people think that if you are under like a power of sale houses, like I have friends that will reach out to me and be like, "Haley, do you know any properties that are under power of sale?" And I'm like, it's still not that great of a deal. Like you have to make it has to make sense for you, right?
Yeah, let's talk about the pros and cons of power sales then. Yeah, like the pros. I mean, you might get a property that's a little bit undervalued.
Might.
I mean,
Yeah.
from my experience, for something like that, like I mean, the best deals for power of sale is because they always come as is. There's no warranties, there's no representation, that everything even works. So your best bet is to buy like a gut job, and hopefully you can get it slightly under market, and then you can work in your margin to do like a rental and a flip. That would be like probably the thing. Or if builders like, the houses to be knocked down is just land value. Those are probably the ones that are probably the best bet, right?
Yeah. But I mean, there's a lot of properties that are actually livable still.
But are you getting a deal?
But that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, so the pros and cons of buying one of those types of homes.
Exactly.
Because our clients would always contact us and be like, "Hey, what kind of power sales do you have? Do you have any power sales? Do you have?" It's like,
I try to steer them away from it because
yeah.
like, I mean,
too.
some of the houses, they don't even come with appliances. Like you look at the pictures, there's nothing there. They even sold a stove. There's nothing left.
But because there is the demand for these products, like your power of sale opportunities, do you find that there's multiple offers in this situation?
If it's priced right.
Depends on the
If it's priced
market,
correct,
of
if
course.
it's attractive.
Yeah.
So there's an appeal. It's kind of like a halo effect. Like, power sale.
Well, usually the banks require a couple days irrevocable too, so that gives time for multiple offers to come in.
Because also the bank has to make sure that they got the best option, right? Because then if down the road the borrower comes back and says, "Hey, listen, you sold it under market value," they can say, "No, look, I got offer A, B, C. Offer C was the best one, and which is why I went with it." So the banks will want that.
And the banks don't open on the weekend, so you don't get an answer that way.
And like the bureaucracy in a bank is insane. Like the way that decision making, like even like I've dealt with it when I'm representing a borrower, and I'll ask them to cut some of their fees because some of the fees are not allowed to charge, and like the lawyer has to talk to like the mortgage person, and they have to go like up this chain to get an answer of like cutting a $1,500 admin fee. So it's just super slow.
But it sounds like a really risky for any buyer seeking out this, because if you find yourself in a multiple situation, and we've covered this in past episodes, where you're almost, I guess, incentivized to waive all your conditions and be competitive and have a high price, and you're stuck with something that's maybe inferior, because if you're overpaying, right?
Oh yeah,
Well-
for sure. In fairness though, I don't think many people that buy under power of sale, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, are doing it as like their family home. Like they're in this business of just buying properties
Yeah.
and all of that. I don't think anyone's like, hey, yeah, I want a house that might not work properly, so me and my family
Well,
can live
actually,
here.
that's the thing. A lot of inexperienced realtors may say, okay, yeah, this is a great deal.
Yeah.
However, they probably don't realize all the flaws that go behind a
Mhm.
power sale.
Yeah.
Right. Hence the cons, right? Because a con, in order for it going into power sale, I would find that the owners would not have enough money to even take care of all the small things that you generally
1000%.
need.
It might not
Yeah.
even be safe to live in, to be honest.
So that's
Yeah,
the
well, I
big
mean, the
reveal.
Furnace might not work.
Yeah, like the
properly,
maintenance of the house.
There
is
could be
not-
mold everywhere.
There could be mold.
Now
The
you
roof
gotta
is leaking.
spend money to fix that, because again, there's no warranties in power of sale. Like you're just getting whatever
Yeah.
you see as is.
Yeah, but you can still do a home inspection. I mean, not like you can ask for anything.
But would you win the
after-
offer? Would
No,
you?
but
let's
at least
say
you'll
if-
know what you're getting into, right?
Usually, it's not a
I
good
mean,
situation.
It's rare.
no.
It's rare you do get multiple offers on a power sale.
Yeah, I put it in the home
Is it?
spectrum.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, it happens, but I
It
wouldn't say it's
happens.
common.
It's not common.
I just thought because of the price appeal or like
Yeah.
the lower price. appeal.
Actually, I've experienced where homes on power sale are priced over market.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, because
Yeah.
the bank is obligated to
well, the
try to get the most money.
appraisal, like whatever was lent out before, was like way over market rate, and they got to recoup, and it just doesn't go because it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
But they also have a schedule too. Like I find like after 30 days, the bank will revisit it and like, okay, it's not selling. Let's just
Mhm.
reduce the price. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
another
Mm.
after 30 days. It's very systematic. I
Yeah,
find.
for sure. They'll drop it like by 50,000 each time. But you're right. It is like usually on 30 days to 45 days, they'll like revisit and drop. Because again, they just want their money back, right? So they're just like,
Hmm.
hey, as soon as this sells, like the faster I get my money.
Question for you guys: have you guys ever done a POS?
Yeah, I have.
Power of
Yeah.
sale. Yeah, power of sale listing. Personally, I've never taken anything on like that because, again, as a realtor, you don't really have too much say in how you market it. It's all the lenders.
Yeah.
They tell you what to do, and you just do it, right?
I've listed
Anyone?
before a power sale.
Have you?
Yeah,
Same.
it's a very different experience because like you're dealing with a business and not like, like an owner, and you're not dealing
Yeah.
with
There's
the
no
usual
emotions.
emotions.
There's no
It's
emotions
just
at
like,
all.
yeah, you're calling like a corporate guy and it's like, okay, what do you want to do? It's
Do
it's-
they offer you guys full commission on a power of sale list?
No, it's not full. So
Yeah,
it's whatever
right?
whatever the market is. So if Markham, for example, then they'll give you a lower commission, for example.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Why is that? So
Just
I actually,
Markham.
the question is, so for buyers trying to get a deal on power sales, is there a particular area in the GTA that you're seeing a spike in power
Oshawa,
sales?
right? You said
Oshawa.
Oshawa?
Yeah, Oshawa
Mm.
definitely. But I was going to say not in Toronto. In Toronto, everything, it doesn't matter.
solid,
Even
yeah.
if it's
It's
under
solid.
power of sale, it's still, there's a demand. I've seen Oshawa. I've seen Barrie randomly and
Okay.
Wow.
Innisfil.
Barrie.
Very.
Yeah. I've seen Innisfil as well.
Because of recreational property?
No,
Potentially?
like
Oh,
home,
it's
home,
Barrie's a-
home. Yeah,
Barrie's a
yeah,
city,
like
man.
yeah.
Well,
It's an
could
urban
be
city.
both. Yeah,
But,
yeah, they have both.
Very.
Do you see POS and foreclosures happening a little bit more in the commercial side?
Not really. The market is my understanding, and you guys, of course, the realtors,
Yeah.
is the value doesn't shift as much in a commercial property.
Mhm.
In terms of like how in a residential home, like you can in like a year it can go up 100,000, but also in the same year it can drop. So it's not as common, and most of the time in commercial properties you have a tenant in there, right? So your
Mhm.
tenant is paying rent, so your flow through cost is sort of there. So I actually don't think I've ever had a power of sale on a commercial property.
So they're usually residential.
Yeah, almost. I would say like if I was to guess, I would say it would be like 95% residential.
Okay, so going back to the cons. So as a buyer, we talked about not having, warranty, everything's being sold as is. Last minute, the original owner can come back
Mhm.
and not close. Is there any other downfalls for buying?
I think the first one is a pretty big downfall, but
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I think that's enough. I mean, I usually
enough.
I usually tell my clients these are the flaws. So yes, you might get a home for this price.
yeah, but you might have to put that much back into the property to fix
Yeah,
it,
exactly.
right? So
Yeah. And you never know what you're gonna find underneath the, you know.
Because the point you made earlier is right. Like when buyers are already in a situation where they're defaulting on the mortgage, like the chances of them taking care of their home to where it needs to be is not high, right? So you have like just general maintenance that's just not getting done. So you're already, even if you even if they were the ones listing it, like the property's probably not going to be in the greatest shape anyway. So you're definitely taking a risk on that.
Yeah.
But closing dates are flexible usually, right? Because the banks, I mean, they don't care as much if it closes.
Yeah, basically.
Whatever the buyer can, whenever they can close.
I would say probably earlier the better, right? Because it gives less chance for the original sellers to come back.
The bank gets their money faster, right? And depending on how close the numbers are, the longer the closing, the more interest that's accruing, right? So say you're like, there's a wiggle room of say like $10,000. If you're saying I want a 90-day closing, like that $10,000 is going to go in interest.
True,
right?
true.
So it really will, that will depend on the numbers as well, for how flexible they'll be.
I think one of the biggest cons for buying one of these is like, if you're a homeowner and you want to buy, let's say you close it, you can't live in it right away because there's so much work that needs to be done usually, whether it's for safety reasons, cosmetics, or even just making the house livable. Let's say you close tomorrow, you're probably in for another 30 to 60 days just to get it up to par. So that's something to consider.
Any final thoughts on any final answer or questions?
But sorry, have any of you guys bought a power of sale home, like on behalf of one of your clients?
I've never purchased,
No, never purchased.
Okay.
I get them to stay away.
Well,
yeah.
Like I've had investors where they were interested in looking at it. Well, for one, we didn't win the bids, whatnot. But two, it's like from their perspective, because they're not living in it, they always look at the numbers. That's all they really care about. So they're like, okay, if I buy this for 800,000, I got to put in 200K. What's the market value for the surrounding area? And then they just kind of work the numbers, and it's usually for a flip. And usually they try to lowball, so they're not going to win the bid for one, and then the numbers don't work out if you do pay the asking price.
That's the thing.
Well, that's the great thing about working with investors is that it's very logical.
It's just number. Which is like I said, I can't imagine people looking for a home for their family being like, I want a power sale house. Like,
maybe it's a contract. They know how to fix everything, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I'll take this risk.
Like that would be a very unique situation where they're okay to buy that.
Well, here's a personal question. Like, I mean, if it were up to you, like, would you look into something if something kind of came across your table? Like, would you consider buying it?
A lot comes across your table. What are you talking?
No, I mean, what's the deals, right?
So I technically can't buy anything that comes across my table because it's a conflict.
Okay.
Because like I would have inside knowledge of what's happening.
You can just say, hey,
you
Richard.
can just tell us. It's like, hey, Richard, you guys, here's a deal.
But
here's my company number.
Send it my way.
But I think that it would really be it has to be like very unique circumstances, and I don't see all of those stars sort of aligning for me to feel comfortable to be like, yeah, I'm down to buy
So
this.
even yourself.
Yeah.
Because you know all the nitty gritty. You know.
For sure.
It's just,
And it's just I again, if you get a great deal, great. But I don't know if the trade.
It's really hit or miss because like you can get a property with very little problems, or you can get one that's a full can of worms, and then now you can go bankrupt if you buy a bad property, and then now you can't sell it later on, right? Because you can't afford to fix it. So
like I have clients where I'd like, the way you seem like you take care of your house, like maybe, but like overall, like I don't know if I would do it.
Any other questions so far? We had a pretty good discussion, actually.
Yeah,
I learned quite a bit.
I'm glad.
Same.
So you'll invite me back.
Here's a question. When you're not being a successful real estate lawyer, what does Gathya do for fun?
Do you want the real answer? Do you want
the real answer?
Of course we want the real answer.
Travel?
To be honest, I do work a lot, but that's out of choice. But when I'm not working, it's either I love food. Like I know everyone says that. This is, like when people are just like, hey, what do you like to do? And they're like, well, I like to try new food. But like, I really like to try new food. I'm a big donut. I love donuts. So I like to call myself a donut connoisseur. And then to counterbalance all that donuts, I'm at the gym.
Fair enough.
I work out to eat donuts, not for health. I don't care.
What's the best donut spot?
I was gonna say
best donut spot that my preference is. There's a place in Mississauga. It's called Daddy-O's.
Oh, okay.
It's hands down. It's this British bakery. It's like the size, like smaller than this room. Hands down, the best donuts.
Ooh,
I've ever
shout
had.
outs.
Yeah.
Shout outs to Daddy.
Daddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So have you tried San Remo's?
I have. There's probably not a donut store you can name that I haven't tried.
Okay.
my claim,
Really?
Daddy-O's compared to San Remo.
yeah, no, Daddy is better.
Wow.
My claim to fame when
Wow.
I tell the story, it's really not that much to claim, but I once drove to St. Catharines to try donuts
Monster?
and come back.
Wow.
No, it's called
Okay.
Beechwood Donuts.
Beechwood.
So good, but I literally drove there. I
Was it
left
worth
in
the
the
drive?
morning. Oh yeah, 100%.
Oh,
I left in the morning one day, and it was like a Saturday in
day
the
trip.
summer.
I'll love to see how you critique a donut.
You should have a channel just.
Hold on. No, what's your criteria for a good donut? Let's break it down. Let's break it down.
No,
Hold on.
that's
What filling to ratio to the dough
I actually
ratio?
don't like donuts with filling in it. I feel like it gets way too
Okay.
sweet.
Okay.
So not to get too technical, but there's two types of donuts. There's like a
Okay.
cake donut where it has more of like a cakey texture, and then there's like a traditional donut. So depending on which type of donuts, I have a different criteria.
Different
It's a
pot,
rate-
different pot.
You sound very passionate.
Yeah,
when
I
you
know.
talk.
You know that Niagara trip. It really reminds you of Harold and Kumar, where we were there
Oh,
over
White
White
Castle.
Castle.
Oh, yes, yeah.
It was a
This is
mission.
my white castle. But yeah.
That's awesome.
But
Thank you for
Yeah.
coming.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
your
so much.
time.
I
Thank you,
enjoyed
Gathya.
it a lot.
It was a lot
Thank
of fun.
you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye bye.
Thank you so much.
That's a
Bye,
wrap.
guys.
Bye.
Bye, guys.